Derrell Peel joins us now. Derrell, let's talk about global beef markets. Which are the biggest beef producing and exporting markets?
As far as beef producers, the U.S. is the biggest beef producing country. Brazil is number 2. China is number 3. And the EU is the 4th largest beef producing country. Generally, big beef producers are the exporters, but there's a little bit of difference. Brazil is the largest beef exporting country. The U.S., India, and Australia make up a second tier, and they run about 60% of Brazil's level. So Brazil is by far the largest. Though that second tier is in there. The U.S. was actually the second largest beef exporting country last year by a little bit, but those three are all about the same size. And then from there you drop about half again into Argentina, the EU, and some countries like that that are part of that list as well.
Which are the biggest beef consuming and importing countries? Again,
the U.S. is the biggest beef consuming country. China is number 2. Brazil is number 3. And the EU is number 4 as far as beef consumers. That's based on total population. When you look at imports, again, the list varies a little bit. China, Hong Kong has been by far the largest beef importing market in recent years. They've grown dramatically in the last 4, 5, 6 years. The U.S. is the second largest beef importing, and then from there it's Japan and South Korea make up the 3rd and 4th largest beef importing markets.
What are some of the big changes that are happening in the global beef trade?
Well, obviously, globally we're in a very uncertain environment right now with everything that's going on geopolitically. So there's that. There's a lot of volatility. Now, I would say that beef markets in general have not been, terribly impacted by the events in Ukraine, for example, and so on. Indirectly, yes, there's a lot of uncertainty and so on, and feed markets, supply chain issues, and so on. The biggest factor, again, is the growth in the China-Hong Kong market in recent years. China-Hong Kong is by far the largest importer. They're the biggest driver of beef flows around the world. And then from there, you could talk about Australia, which historically was a very large exporter. They've been in a rebuilding process. They've had very limited cattle numbers. In fact, beef production last year was the lowest in more than 2 decades in Australia. So their exports have been curtailed, but they're in the process of rebuilding now. So they'll be back. That'll change in the coming years. And then Argentina, likewise, used to be a bigger exporter, excuse me, and they dropped off the map kind of for a few years. They're kind of coming back. They've had some issues with their government policies impacting trade, but they're certainly kind of back in the hunt now.
How will beef exports and imports affect the U.S. beef market in 2022?
Again, the U.S. was the second largest beef exporter last year, and we think they'll stay very strong this year. They'll probably be down a little bit from last year, but again, historically high. So it's been an important part of our total beef demand. On the importing side, imports will probably go up a little bit. We've seen a big increase in imports from Brazil because they got a change in status now that allows them to export fresh beef to the U.S. And so far this year, we've seen a pretty big increase from Brazil. That will actually moderate as we go through the year. Because first of all, they're going to face a tariff rate quota once they fill the open or the other country tariff rate quota. So, those will be some of the bigger factors that will affect the U.S. But the trade picture continues to be a very strong part of our total beef market and contributing a lot to beef prices and to our beef industry.
Thank you, Derrell, and we'll be sure to keep an eye on those markets.